They opened fire into the darkness with no clear aim while our guns answered with deliberate accuracy, striking targets as the Japanese destroyers sprayed shells blindly across the night. On our radar screens, every hostile vessel appeared with a clarity that seemed like daylight, glowing dots sweeping steadily across the green light. I watched those signals creep closer through the black waters of Surigao Strait, knowing that within minutes, American engineering would unleash destruction. The Imperial Navy could never forget. My name is Lieutenant Commander Jack Morrison, and on the night of October 25, 1944, I was the fire control officer aboard the heavy cruiser USS Louisville. What I witnessed forever transformed naval combat. For the first time, an entire fleet would fight and prevail, relying solely on electronic instruments to detect and track the enemy. The Japanese had expected a traditional night clash with star shells and searchlights to reveal silhouettes in the dark, but instead they sailed into a carefully prepared ambush born of American science and industry, an encounter that would demonstrate technological superiority in its purest form. 3 days earlier, Admiral Oldendorf received reports that a Japanese southern force was steaming toward Leyte Gulf. This enemy consisted of 2 separate battleship divisions under Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura and Rear Admiral Kyohei Deshima. Their plan was to force their way through the narrow waters of Surigao Strait and attack our invasion forces at dawn, hoping to catch our landing craft and transports unprepared. Intelligence revealed that their formation carried the battleships Yamashiro and Fuso, 3 heavy cruisers, and 8 destroyers, a fleet powerful enough to inflict devastating damage. Yet Oldendorf commanded something even more formidable: a line of 6 American battleships, 8 cruisers, and scores of destroyers, each equipped with the most advanced radar-directed fire control systems ever fielded at sea. Our own ship, Louisville, carried the revolutionary Mark 8 fire control radar, a system able to follow and predict enemy movement with pinpoint accuracy regardless of visibility. While the Japanese relied on crude optical rangefinders and bursts of star shells. To light up the horizon, we possessed electronic eyes that transformed night into day. I remember standing inside the Combat Information Center as our ship slid into position within the battle line. The room vibrated with energy, filled with the steady hum of equipment, the glow of cathode ray tubes, the shifting markers on plotting boards, and the rhythmic sweep of radar arms across green-lit screens that painted the tactical situation in living light. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, our senior radar operator, had spent 2 decades in the Navy, but even he had never seen technology of this magnitude at work. His voice carried calm precision as he announced, "Contacts bearing 270, range 32,000 yards, multiple large vessels moving in column." Captain Harold Morrison, who coincidentally shared my last name though we were not related, leaned over the radar plot, his face intent and unreadable under the dim red lights. The Mark 8 gave us the ability to track single ships at ranges that would have seemed impossible only a few years earlier. "All stations," he ordered firmly. "We have firm electronic contact on the Japanese southern force. They are sailing directly into our trap." It was a perfect tactical arrangement. Admiral Oldendorf had deployed our ships in a classic crossing the T formation at the mouth of the strait. This maneuver meant the Japanese, advancing in a narrow column, would be exposed to the full weight of our broadside fire, while they could only reply with their forward guns. Even more decisive was the radar advantage, for we would unleash our salvos long before they even realized we were there. At exactly 3 in the morning, the opening phase began as the nimble PT boats of Squadron 3 darted forward to launch torpedoes against the leading enemy destroyers. On our radar, we followed their movements, tiny blips weaving swiftly like hornets around the larger enemy contacts, their torpedo wakes invisible to the eye, but their explosions flashing across the horizon as they struck home, lighting the black sky with violent bursts that echoed across the water. The battleship Fuso endured a barrage of heavy strikes that tore through her armor and machinery, forcing her to drift out of the main formation, mortally damaged and no longer able to keep pace. I reported to Captain Morrison that the enemy line was unraveling, with the forward elements pressing northward, while other vessels were either dead in the water, slowing rapidly, or maneuvering in erratic, desperate patterns. The captain gave a grim nod, his voice low as he acknowledged that the patrol torpedo boats had done their work, and that it was now time for the main battle line to unleash its power. At 0351 hours, Admiral Oldendorf delivered the command that every crewman had been waiting for, a single order that echoed across the ships and signaled the start of destruction. Open fire. In that instant, the sea was transformed into a proving ground for the future of naval combat as the full potential of radar-directed gunnery revealed itself. The Japanese, relying on human eyes strained to the limit, searched the black horizon for gun flashes, while our Mark 8 radars locked with mechanical exactness onto their vessels. The USS West Virginia broke the silence first, her 16-inch rifles roaring into the night with thunder that shook the sea, and immediately the rest of the battle line joined in, 5 more battleships thundering in sequence. The air trembled with the shock waves of each broadside, a rolling wall of sound and fury that seemed to split the night itself. Yet it was the cruisers, including our Louisville, that delivered the steady rhythm of destruction. Battery away, I called as our 8-inch guns barked in perfect cadence, each salvo calculated with unerring precision by the Mark 8 system that continuously supplied range and bearing. The radar's mechanical brain processed solutions faster and more accurately than human crews had ever achieved, turning guesswork into certainty. Our very first salvo struck home, a result nearly unimaginable in the age of earlier night battles, where ships fired blindly into darkness, hoping chance would guide their shells. Now technology had made chance irrelevant. Across the horizon, great blossoms of fire burst from the Japanese column as shells struck home, tearing into steel and igniting flames. On our glowing radar screen, we watched enemy icons stumble and falter, some slowing, some drifting off course, some simply vanishing as explosions consumed them. Their return fire, though fierce, was wasted energy. Shells crashed into the sea far from our line, aimed at the brief flashes of our guns rather than our true positions. The Japanese fought shadows while we struck reality, every move of theirs recorded and tracked with precision. Chief Rodriguez kept a running tally from his scope, his calm voice a constant in the chaos as he announced each new blow. The leading destroyer struck repeatedly until she drifted powerless. The second destroyer veering sharply to port, smoke, and fire pouring from her decks as she listed heavily. A battleship icon still pressing ahead but visibly engulfed in flames. Amid this destruction, Admiral Nishimura pressed forward with the heart of a warrior. His flagship, the battleship Yamashiro, charged directly into the storm of American firepower, leading his men with a defiance that bordered on the impossible. It was a display of courage and devotion, yet no human valor could overcome the cold, mathematical advantage of radar and fire control computers. While Yamashiro's gunners hurled salvo after salvo into the night, striking nothing but empty water, our systems locked onto her vital organs with a precision that grew deadlier with each passing minute. At 0419 hours, the end came in a cataclysm of fire and steel. The Yamashiro, crushed under the combined broadsides of multiple American ships, erupted in a titanic explosion that painted the strait in blinding light. Flames soared into the sky, illuminating the wreckage-strewn waters as if dawn had come early. Admiral Nishimura went down with his vessel, bound to the code of his navy and unwilling to abandon his post, a tragic testament to bravery, overwhelmed by the relentless progress of technology. On the radar screen, the glowing contact that had been Yamashiro flickered and disappeared. Chief Rodriguez confirmed it in a steady voice, saying the battleship had vanished from scope and that the tremendous explosion had been visible even from our own position. Satisfaction rippled quietly through the crew, yet the night still held more battles. At 0430 hours, new contacts appeared, a fresh Japanese formation detected approaching from the south. This was Admiral Shima's cruiser group, steaming into a strait already transformed into a graveyard of burning ships and drifting oil slicks. As his formation neared, the reality of the devastation became clear, hulks blazing and waters littered with debris. Unlike Nishimura, Shima recognized the hopelessness almost immediately. When his flagship collided with one of the shattered wrecks from the earlier exchange, his decision was made. He gave the order to retreat, turning his ships away from the inferno of Surigao Strait and leaving behind the proof that radar had changed the very nature of naval warfare forever. The edge we revealed that night went far beyond simply being able to detect targets in the dark. Our Mark 8 radar was more than a set of eyes piercing the night. It was linked directly with analog computers that worked without pause, taking into account the pitch and roll of our ship, the velocity of the wind, the curvature of the shell's flight, and every other factor that could affect a shot. These machines performed their calculations instantly and fed perfect solutions to the gunnery directors, freeing us from the old method of guesswork. The Japanese gunners, on the other hand, were left to their traditional methods, adjusting their aim shot by shot as they watched their shells splash into the sea, hoping the next one might strike home. The difference was stark. Our guns fired with a cold precision, as though guided by something more than human, while theirs seemed clumsy and uncertain. Lieutenant Bobby Chen, our gunnery officer, had prepared intensely with the system at Mare Island before deployment. I remembered his words as our turrets thundered against a Japanese cruiser, tearing her apart piece by piece. "It's like being given superhuman vision," he told me with quiet confidence. "We can see everything as clearly as day, while they are shooting into nothing." He was right. The impact on the enemy was more than physical. It was psychological. The surviving Japanese later described the terror of facing an unseen enemy that struck with unerring accuracy while remaining invisible. Some compared it to being haunted by ghosts, their men unable to comprehend how shells appeared out of the darkness again and again with deadly effect, while their own fire splashed into the empty void. By 5 in the morning, the outcome was beyond dispute. The Japanese Southern Force had been shattered. They had committed 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, and 8 destroyers into the strait. By the time the guns fell silent, only 1 destroyer and 1 cruiser remained afloat without crippling damage. The once proud battleships Yamashiro and Fuso had both been sent to the bottom, along with 3 destroyers torn apart by relentless fire. On our side, the cost was small by comparison, though every life weighed heavy. 39 men were dead, 114 wounded across the task force, most of them casualties from the daring PT boat attacks earlier in the night, rather than from the main battle line. Yet the true significance of that night was not measured in losses or tonnage, but in what it proved. We had shown the world that radar-directed fire control had overturned centuries of naval tradition. The Japanese Navy, which had built its reputation on expert night fighting and unmatched optics, had been completely outclassed. Their carefully honed skills, their pride in precision maneuvers and quick reactions in darkness, all meant nothing when confronted with machines that could see through the blackness as if it were noon. As the first light of dawn crept over Surigao Strait, I climbed to the bridge and looked out across the waters. The scene was one of devastation. The narrow channel was choked with wreckage, the oil from shattered ships spreading in thick black, slicks across the surface burning in places where flames still licked at the waves. Here and there I could make out survivors clinging to fragments of their shattered vessels, their shapes small against the vast ruin that surrounded them. The air itself was heavy and hard to breathe, filled with the acrid stench of cordite and the choking smell of fuel oil still smoldering on the surface. Captain Morrison stood at the rail, binoculars pressed to his face as he studied the aftermath in silence. After a long moment, he lowered the glasses and spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Hell of a thing, Jack. We just fought an entire battle without once laying eyes on the enemy." His words struck me as deeply as the sight before us. The realization was inescapable. For centuries, sea battles had depended on the ability to see, to spot the enemy's sails on the horizon, to outmaneuver them with seamanship and courage, to aim guns by eyesight and judgment. All of that had changed in a single night. Radar had made vision nearly irrelevant. From now on, victory would belong to the Navy that possessed the better machines, the sharper electronics, the greater industrial base to build and refine them. Our operators had struck at ranges beyond 15 miles, distances 3 times farther than the most powerful optical sights could ever hope to function. The Mark 8 did not just track a target. It clung to it, holding the enemy in its electronic grip no matter how frantically they maneuvered. Even more astonishing, the longer the battle went on, the better it became. Each salvo refined the calculations, each return of data making the next strike more precise than the last. By the end, our accuracy had reached levels no human crew could dream of matching. Chief Rodriguez, who had served 2 decades at sea and seen every kind of gunnery drill and exercise, summed it up better than anyone. He shook his head as the screens went quiet and said, "20 years in the Navy, and I never thought I'd see the day we could hammer ships we couldn't even see. Those poor bastards thought they were walking into a fair fight, but we brought a machine to a gunfight." The Japanese had invested their faith in human skill, in training officers and crews to fight with flawless precision in the dark, in building optics that could read the night as clearly as daylight. But against the electronic eyes and computing power of our fleet, that entire doctrine crumbled. Admiral Shima's decision to retreat was the only thing that spared his remaining ships from sharing the fate of Nishimura's force. When his flagship collided with one of the shattered wrecks drifting in the channel, he recognized what had to be done and ordered his battered group to withdraw. His subsequent report to Tokyo left no illusions. He described a night where the Japanese Navy had been beaten not by chance, not even by overwhelming numbers alone, but by an opponent whose machines had stripped them of every advantage and shown that the future of naval warfare now belonged to technology. For the first time, the Japanese Naval High Command came to grips with the fact that they were not merely fighting a fleet with larger numbers, but were standing against weapons that had rendered all of their painstakingly developed doctrines irrelevant in the span of a single night. Their years of training in night fighting, their reliance on optics, their belief in maneuver and gunnery perfected through repetition, all crumbled when met with a force that could see through the dark as though it were broad daylight. The defeat of their southern force carried not only tactical consequences but strategic ones as well. For with those ships destroyed, the last serious obstacle to our landings at Leyte vanished, and the collapse of Japanese naval influence in Sapisti, the Philippines, became inevitable. More than that, the engagement put on display for all to see the sheer weight of American industry and the remarkable achievements of American science, proving in undeniable fashion that the balance of power had shifted. In the dimly lit Combat Information Center, the radar scopes swept in their steady rhythm, green beams illuminating the void and returning nothing now but silence and empty sea, while the machines that had guided us to victory hummed softly as if waiting to be called upon again. Lieutenant Chen, eyes fixed on the fire control data, was already calculating percentages, charting accuracy, and measuring the consistency of each battery's performance. His report that 93% of our salvos had struck their targets was delivered with quiet pride, for in daylight even our best gunnery rarely passed 70%. The radar-directed fire control system had surpassed every expectation. Those numbers were not just figures. They told the story of a revolution. Naval gunfire had always been a matter of art, of trained men making judgments under pressure, but the machines had taken that role and refined it into something closer to absolute precision, removing guesswork and making naval combat resemble mathematics more than chance. For our opponents, the psychological blow was immense. Survivors pulled from the water spoke in hushed voices of what they had faced. One petty officer, Tanaka, told interrogators that to them the Americans had seemed like unseen demons, hurling steel from an invisible distance. He said their shells fell like torrents of rain, yet Japanese fire vanished into the dark ocean without trace, and he compared the struggle to fighting gods. Such testimonies revealed just how utterly their faith in night fighting had been overturned. They had entered the strait believing their superior training under cover of darkness would carry the day, but they discovered instead that the very foundation of their doctrine had been stripped away by American technology. Their confidence dissolved into confusion and dread as the realization dawned that they were not only losing ships, but losing the essence of what they believed made them strong. As Louisville turned northward to link with the main fleet, I could not help but reflect on what had unfolded. History would remember this as the last great battle fought by battleships, but its deeper meaning lay in its heralding of a new age. Radar had transformed naval combat as surely as gunpowder centuries before had changed the nature of war on land. The men at our radar stations and the operators at the fire control computers had performed duties no less vital than any lookout or gunner in past wars, for they had guided our guns to strike with flawless precision against an enemy we never even laid eyes on. Chief Rodriguez and his crew had made possible what seemed unthinkable a decade earlier, to fight and win a battle without seeing the foe. As the ship cleared the strait, Captain Morrison's voice echoed over the intercom, steady and proud, calling the crew to one final battle station. He told us we had achieved something historic, not only defeating a powerful fleet but proving beyond doubt that American science and industry could triumph over any challenge placed before it. He declared that the systems which had guided our weapons that night represented the future of warfare. And indeed, the future had arrived in those narrow waters. In the months to come, radar-directed gunnery would become standard throughout the Pacific, giving our fleets a decisive edge that carried us from victory to victory until Japan itself lay within reach. Yet it began here, between Leyte and Mindanao, where electronic eyes cut through the darkness and left the Imperial Navy stunned into helplessness. Looking back across the years, the fight at Surigao Strait stands as a clear lesson in how swiftly technology can overturn the assumptions of war. The Japanese came armed with skill, courage, and training, yet those qualities were no match against a weapon system that made their talents obsolete in a single night. The transformation did not remain confined to the sea, for the same principles that allowed our guns to fire unseen would carry into the skies, into missile defense, and eventually beyond the Earth itself. The computers that calculated our trajectories, primitive though they seem now, were the ancestors of the machines that would shape the very fabric of modern civilization. But on that October night of 1944, we were only sailors doing our duty, men drawn from farms and cities across America, given extraordinary tools and trained to wield them with skill. Their dedication, combined with the new technology, brought forth a victory that echoed across the globe and hastened the Pacific War's end. Chief Rodriguez, always direct, summed up what we had accomplished as the order came to secure from battle stations. He said the Japanese had come expecting combat as they had always known it, but what they received instead was a demonstration of what the future looked like. And that future had not crept in slowly or cautiously. It had arrived all at once, with the thunder of guns guided by unseen eyes, and it struck with a vengeance in the black waters of Surigao Strait. American radar had achieved more than securing a crucial victory. It had fundamentally transformed naval warfare, establishing a new standard for how battles would be fought in the future. The electronic eyes that cut through the darkness that night guided every Allied ship toward ultimate success in the Pacific, proving that industrial power and scientific innovation could be as decisive as courage, seamanship, or numbers alone. As the sun rose over the Philippines on October 25, 1944, it illuminated not merely another American triumph, but the beginning of a new era in military operations, an age defined by technological advantage and electronic mastery. The men who served that night, from the radar operators monitoring their screens to the gunners executing precise fire, had taken part in a revolution in warfare. They demonstrated that American ingenuity, training, and determination could overcome any opponent, regardless of skill, experience, or bravery. The effects of that achievement radiated across the Pacific and the world, signaling that warfare had entered an age where technology could dictate the outcome of battle. Military historians would later study Surigao Strait as a prime example of how innovation could decisively shift military balance. The radar systems that granted Americans such control were products of collaboration between universities, industry, and scientific research, reflecting the mobilization of the nation's intellectual and industrial capacity for victory in the greatest war in human history. The Japanese ships that entered the strait that night were among the most experienced and capable in the Imperial Navy, yet their defeat was not due to lack of skill or bravery, but to the overwhelming superiority of American radar and fire control systems. By demonstrating that advantage so decisively, the United States proved it possessed not only the largest fleet, but also the most advanced. The electronic revolution that began at Surigao Strait would ultimately extend beyond the sea, shaping air combat, missile defense, and eventually space exploration. The analog computers that guided our guns were primitive by modern standards, but were the forerunners of digital systems that would reshape human civilization. On that October night in 1944, however, we were sailors performing our duty with the best equipment the nation could provide, ordinary men wielding extraordinary tools. Our radar operators, fire control technicians, and gun crews achieved devastating accuracy that astonished the world and hastened the end of the Pacific War. Chief Rodriguez summarized the accomplishment plainly. The Japanese had come seeking a fight, but we delivered a glimpse of the future, a demonstration of the power of technology combined with skill and resolve. That night in Surigao Strait, American radar proved that scientific knowledge and industrial capability could be as decisive as traditional military virtues, transforming the nature of naval warfare forever. It marked not only a tactical victory, but also a turning point, showing the world that technological superiority could dictate outcomes and that American innovation under pressure could overcome any challenge. The systems that guided our guns were designed, produced, and deployed in less than 3 years, a remarkable testament to the coordination of scientific research and industrial effort on an unprecedented scale. As I left USS Louisville and returned to civilian life, I carried with me the memory of that extraordinary night when technology reshaped naval combat. The men who designed, built, and operated those systems had delivered an advantage as decisive as any in history, proving that American innovation paired with determination could overcome even the most formidable enemies. The Battle of Surigao Strait remains as enduring evidence that in the modern age, victory belongs to those nations that can best apply science and technology to military purposes. On that dark night in October 1944, American radar revealed the future of warfare, and that future belonged unmistakably to us.